My girlfriend Rachel and I had been together for about 8 months. Up until that point, things between us felt pretty normal and stable. We didn't fight often, and when we did, it was usually about small things. Rachel had a personality that some people found refreshing. She spoke her mind openly and didn't worry too much about how her words might sound. At first I admired that honesty. Sometimes it even felt brave. A lot of people hide what they really think to avoid awkward situations. Rachel never seemed to care about that. But there were also moments where her bluntness crossed into something else. I didn't always notice it right away. When you care about someone, it's easy to overlook the rough edges. That summer we decided to take a vacation together. It was the first big trip we had taken as a couple, and I was excited to spend that time together. The plan was to travel out west for about a week. The trip itself went really well. We visited several cities, took pictures everywhere, and spent a lot of time exploring places neither of us had seen before. It felt like the kind of vacation that strengthens a relationship. By the end of the trip we had one last stop planned. My parents lived nearby, and I suggested we visit them for a couple of days before heading back home. Rachel had never met my parents before. I had told her a lot about them over the months we had been dating. I was excited for them to finally meet her. My parents are pretty relaxed people. They're not strict or overly traditional, and they usually make guests feel comfortable right away. When we pulled into their driveway, my mom came outside to greet us. She gave me a big hug and welcomed Rachel warmly. She told us she had already prepared the guest room for us. She said we could relax, unpack, or even go use the hot tub if we wanted. Rachel seemed surprised by that. She laughed and said something that immediately caught my attention. She said, "Wait, we get our own room together?" My parents would never allow that unless we were married. My mom laughed politely and said she trusted adults to behave responsibly. She didn't seem bothered by the comment at all. After that, she told us they were thinking about taking us out to dinner later that evening. She said we could just let her know when we were ready to go. Rachel smiled and thanked her. Everything seemed friendly enough. For the next few hours, Rachel and I stayed in the room my parents prepared for us. Being back in my childhood home felt strange but comforting. We spent some time unpacking and talking about the trip. Eventually, we started fooling around like a couple of teenagers. There was something funny about acting like that in my parents' house again. It reminded me of being younger. At that moment, everything felt good. I remember thinking how nice it was to bring Rachel into that part of my life. Later in the evening, my parents drove us all to a restaurant nearby. It was one of the places they had been going to for years. The four of us sat together and started talking about the vacation. My dad asked about the cities we visited and what our favorite places were. Rachel told several stories from the trip. She described the food we tried and the places we explored. The conversation felt easy and relaxed at first. Everyone was laughing and enjoying themselves. Then the topic suddenly shifted. Rachel started talking about marriage and kids. She said something that made the table go quiet for a moment. She said, "I have to have kids before I turn 30. She said it very casually, like it was a simple life rule. Then she added something else. "It's different for guys," she said. "You can wait forever. But women don't really have that luxury." I felt a slight tension in the air immediately. I glanced at my parents and noticed they had stopped talking. The comment might not sound offensive by itself, but I knew something Rachel didn't seem to consider. My parents had me later in life. My mom was older than most mothers when she had her first child. It was something she had always been open about. She had focused on her career and other priorities earlier in life. Eventually, she decided she wanted a family. That decision had never been controversial in our family. But Rachel's comment suddenly made it feel like it was. Neither of my parents said anything in response. My dad changed the subject and asked about another part of the vacation. Rachel didn't seem to notice the awkwardness at all. She continued talking like nothing unusual had happened. For the rest of dinner, the conversation moved normally again. But I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling that moment had created. When we finally got back to my parents' house, Rachel and I went to our room. As soon as the door closed, I decided to ask her about it. I asked why she brought up having kids before 30. She looked confused, like she didn't understand the question. I reminded her that my mom had me later in life. Rachel shrugged slightly. Then she said something that bothered me even more. She said she already knew that. I asked her why she would say something like that at dinner if she knew. Her response caught me completely off guard. She said she didn't agree with my mom's priorities. According to her, people shouldn't wait that long to have children. She also said she thought my parents were too liberal about certain things. The way she said it felt dismissive. It sounded less like a difference of opinion and more like judgment. I tried explaining that my parents were happy with their choices. My mom had always been proud of the life she built before having kids. Rachel didn't seem convinced. She said everyone has their own opinions. That was true. But something about the way she talked about my mom felt wrong to me. It didn't feel like simple disagreement. It felt like disrespect. That thought stuck in my mind during the rest of the trip home. Over the next day, I kept replaying the dinner conversation in my head. The more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I felt. Rachel's comment hadn't been accidental. She knew my parents' situation before we even arrived, which meant she had chosen to say that anyway. I started wondering if I had overlooked other moments like this during our relationship. Maybe what I had always called honesty was actually something else. Maybe it had always been tactlessness. The idea made me uneasy. But I still wanted to understand her reasoning before jumping to conclusions. So when we got home the next day, I asked Rachel if we could talk about it again. I wanted to understand why she had such a strong reaction to my mom. At first she seemed annoyed that I was bringing it up again. But then she said something that completely changed the direction of the conversation. She looked at me and said something about my parents that I never expected to hear. And the moment she said it, I realized our relationship might not survive the conversation. When Rachel said she didn't agree with my mom's priorities, I thought that was the worst part of the conversation. I assumed we were just dealing with a difference in opinions about life choices. I expected the discussion to end there. But Rachel wasn't finished talking. She looked at me for a moment like she was deciding how honest she wanted to be. Then she said something completely unexpected. She said it was strange how attractive my dad still was. She even added that he probably could have been a model when he was younger. At first I thought she was just making a random observation. But the way she said it felt strange. Then she continued. She said my mom wasn't anywhere close to being in the same league as my dad. For a moment I just stared at her. I genuinely thought I had misunderstood what she said. I asked her to repeat what she meant. Instead of softening the comment, she doubled down. She said she thought it was odd that my parents were together. According to her, the difference in their looks made the relationship seem strange. Then she used a word that made my stomach drop. She said it was creepy. Hearing someone talk about my parents like that shocked me. My parents had been married for decades and clearly loved each other. The idea that their relationship was somehow inappropriate felt absurd. I tried to stay calm and ask her what exactly she meant. She shrugged like the whole thing was obvious. She said my dad was very good looking and my mom wasn't. Then she said relationships like that always seemed suspicious to her. I felt anger building in my chest. Not just because she insulted my mom's appearance, but because of the way she said it. There was no hesitation or guilt in her voice. She spoke like she was stating a fact. I tried to explain that my parents had always had a strong relationship. They supported each other and built a life together. Rachel just rolled her eyes slightly. Then she said something even worse. She said she didn't like my mom, just like that. No explanation, no hesitation. She simply stated it as if it should have been obvious. I asked her why she didn't like her. Rachel responded with something that made the entire conversation feel pointless. She said she didn't have to like her. Technically, she was right. No one is obligated to like someone else's parents. But the way she said it carried a level of disrespect that I couldn't ignore. The conversation became frustrating after that. Every question I asked felt like pulling teeth. Rachel didn't seem interested in explaining her perspective in a meaningful way. She just repeated that she had her own opinions, and that she wasn't going to pretend to like someone she didn't respect. The more we talked, the more uneasy I felt. I started realizing that the problem wasn't just what she said at dinner. The problem was how comfortable she seemed insulting someone important to me. Rachel had always been blunt. That was something I once admired. But now it felt like something else. It felt like cruelty disguised as honesty. I began thinking about other moments during our relationship. Times when Rachel had made harsh comments about strangers or people she barely knew. Back then I brushed those moments off as jokes. Now I wondered if I had ignored warning signs. The conversation continued for a while longer, but nothing productive came from it. Rachel didn't seem interested in seeing my perspective. And I couldn't accept the way she talked about my mom. Eventually I realized something important. I didn't feel comforted by Rachel anymore. I felt uncertain around her. The thought hit me harder than I expected. Relationships are supposed to make you feel supported and confident. But Rachel made me question things that had never bothered me before. At that moment, I knew the relationship probably wasn't going to work. The next day, I decided to meet Rachel at her apartment. Originally, I thought we might just talk more about what happened. Maybe we could clear up the misunderstanding. But deep down, I already knew the conversation might lead somewhere else. When I arrived, Rachel greeted me casually. She asked if we should go out for dinner. I told her I wanted to talk first. She immediately looked slightly annoyed. Still, she sat down and waited for me to explain. I told her I was still thinking about what she said about my mom during the trip. I said I didn't understand why she felt the need to criticize her like that. Rachel listened quietly for a moment. Then she said something that completely erased any doubt in my mind. She said the problem wasn't just my mom. She said the real problem was me. According to Rachel, the fact that I defended my mom made me look weak. Then she used a phrase I will never forget. She said being a mama's boy was ugly. I felt the anger rise instantly. But before I could respond, she added one more insult. She said I was cursed with my mom's looks. For a few seconds, the room was completely silent. Hearing someone speak about my family that way felt surreal. Rachel looked at me like she had just won an argument. But the truth was, the argument was already over. In that moment, my decision became incredibly clear. I told Rachel that the relationship wasn't going to work anymore. At first, she thought I was joking. But when she realized I was serious, her expression changed. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to fix anything. Instead, she repeated the same insult again. She said mama's boys were ugly and that I should get used to looking like my mom. That was the last thing she said before I walked out. Ending the relationship felt strange. Part of me expected to feel devastated. But instead I felt something else. Relief. Later that evening I called my parents. I wanted to tell them the relationship had ended. My dad answered the phone first. When I explained the situation, he didn't seem surprised. He simply said I made the right decision. Then he said something that made me laugh. He said Rachel was dumber than a box of hair. After that I spoke to my mom. She asked why I broke up with Rachel. At first I tried to keep the explanation simple. But my mom knows me well enough to tell when I'm hiding something. Eventually I told her everything. I expected her to feel hurt by Rachel's comments. Instead she started laughing. She said Rachel sounded like a mean girl. Then she told me she was glad it only took me 8 months to realize it. Before we hung up, she said one more thing. She told my dad that he still had it. And hearing them laugh together reminded me exactly why their relationship worked so well.